Hello and welcome. My name is Yasmina Tulwil, and I am the Director of Film Programming at the Arab Film and Media Institute. Today, I'm joined by Maysoon Pachachi, the director and co-writer of Our River, Our Sky, one of the incredible films that we have the honor to screen as part of this year's Arab Film Festival. Maysoon is a London-based filmmaker of Iraqi origin. She was educated in Iraq and the USA and the UK. She studied philosophy at the University College London and then filmmaking at London Film School. For many years, she was has been a documentary and drama film editor and has worked since 1994 as an independent documentary director, largely making films in and about the Middle East. Maysoon has also taught film directing and editing in Britain and Palestine. In 2004, with her colleague, Iraqi filmmaker Kasim Abid, she co-founded Independent Film and Television College, a free-of-charge film training center in Baghdad, where students produce 17 short documentary films shown at festivals and screenings internationally and within Iraq at a traveling film festival. Our River, Our Sky is Maysoon's debut narrative feature film. It tells the story of a novelist and her neighbors in Baghdad, which unfold and intersect as their lives are torn apart by extreme sectarian violence, while nightly curfews trap them inside their home. In 2006, I should say, for context as well. The film premiered early this year at Sarajevo Film Festival, and we are so honored to have it at our festival as well. Thank you, Maysoon, for joining us and today in this discussion of your work and your career. It is such a pleasure to finally meet you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so glad we found out about your film. It's truly it was one of the more unique films but also more insightful films I feel like I got the chance to see. One of the things that I found unique, I mean, it's a style that is used in filmmaking for many years now, but I haven't seen it a lot in the films I've watched recently, is the way the fact that this film is not about one person or just one story, but instead about many people and their interweaving narratives shown in these vignettes of their life. So I wanted to start off by asking how you developed this idea and what was the inspiration for it?
I worked, my co-writer, Irada Jabouri, who is Baghdad-based. I mean, she lives in Baghdad. She's a writer and women's rights activist. And I are good friends, and we decided we wanted to try to make a film together. And she said to me, well, actually, she'd stopped being able to write, I mean, any kind of fiction at all because of the shock of the situation in Iraq in 2006, which is barbaric sectarian violence going on and very unsure, kind of unstable situation. She stopped being able to write one word of fiction. So what happened to her is when she was, taking her child to school or buying groceries or anything, she would hear little exchanges between people and sort of scenes being enacted if you pulled back from it and watched it. And this is all she could write. She just wrote down, she noted down these things, conversations she had with people and so forth. Meanwhile, while we'd started the film school in Iraq in 2004. So I was in contact with students there and heard many of their stories and the films they were making. And also I was part of a women's group, Iraqi and non-Iraqi women's group, which was formed initially to work against the sanctions against Iraq and then against the war. And so we were very much in contact with people there. So we gathered all these stories together and we began to extract and extrapolate characters from them and then brought to bear, the rest of our experience and found our characters and our stories. So that's how it developed, basically.
Yeah. That is so interesting, and I love learning that. I mean, that this story, this film is truly based in reality, not only with the general things that were going on in Iraq, but there are bits and pieces of people's real life
Yeah.
lives embedded in the film. Did I read somewhere that the character of Sarah is based on your co-writer's life a little bit?
In a way, in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, she also has. She's she's not with the father of her child, her
Mm,
little girl, who
yeah.
I met. I mean, I met them both actually. She and her daughter Dima, who
Mhm,
was 6 years old at the time.
mm,
And I made a film which I think was shown at the San Francisco Arab Film Festival a long time. I mean, maybe out of 2010 or something. And
yeah.
uh, it was a photographic project with Iraqi
Mhm,
women who came together in a house in Syria to learn about photography, to tell
mhm,
make photo stories, which eventually became an exhibition that toured the world and everything. My job was to make a film of this whole process. It was the most
mhm,
extraordinary project to be involved with. And Irada was the person who had gathered together the women to take part um, in this workshop. Basically, is what it was.
mhm,
And she brought her daughter Dima along, and
yeah.
Dima was just an extraordinary child. So she
Mhm.
became my best friend on this thing. And so so there's similarities between the character
Mhm,
of Sarah and Irada in a way, yeah.
yeah.
And she also couldn't write. She had this kind of
Yeah,
block. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So how what was the process like of writing this then, of developing? I mean, obviously there it is based in these stories that you and Irada heard. But how did you go about developing all of the actual characters and interweaving their stories with each other to make the film that we see now?
It was. I mean, the way we worked together is we sort of from the stuff that she'd collected, we sort of
Hmm.
extracted characters, and we sort of agreed on that. And and we wrote the first couple of drafts of the script
Hmm.
together in Arabic, and then we had to start looking for funding, and the funding
Hmm.
came mainly from Europe. So
Hmm.
obviously we had to write in another language. So we wrote, and
Hmm.
so and Irada was she was teaching at university and everything. She was very busy, and she had her child and everything like that. So
Hmm.
I took over a lot of the writing in English, which had to be translated back into Arabic when we finally came to it. And it was a
Okay.
complicated process, but it went back
Yeah.
and forth between us, and it wasn't. It was quite difficult to go to Iraq at that point. So we
Hmm.
had to meet in. We met in Beirut. We met in Amman, and I really wanted her to come to Britain, but I mean the immigration laws were so tight that I couldn't get her a visa to come.
Yeah.
So it was like that, and long telephone conversations and so forth, and just characters that we just came into our mind. I mean, there's the character of the boatman, for example, the guy who
Hmm.
lives in his boat. I mean, the trigger for that was somebody I met, but it wasn't the same situation at all. But it was somebody who'd left where they lived, because it was just what he was having to see every day was something more than he could bear, kind of thing.
Hmm.
And so I just made this character from that little bit of story. So it went like
Yeah.
that. And there's some things in the film that actually I mean, the scene in the bus.
Hmm.
Remember that? That actually happened. That was the dialogue that was going on in the bus that
Okay.
the writer was in, and she wrote it down. And
Hmm.
it was long. It was a longer scene, but it was so that I mean, it was that, and it's just bringing to bear our own experience and people that we've known in our lives who have nothing to do with this situation. I mean,
Yeah.
so it was just. I think it's probably a process that most writing goes through. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I liked the character, the through line of the character of the boatman. I don't know why I found him so interesting, but I think just because he was so observational of all the
He's
situations
the
going
witness.
on.
He's the
Yeah.
witness in a way. I mean, I didn't sort of realize that until we
Mhm.
shot the film. And I thought,
Yeah.
oh, this is who this is. He's like the spirit of Baghdad in some way,
Yeah.
somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Um, how long did you say it took you to make the film? Did you say
But
a
to raise
year?
the money and everything,
Yeah.
to raise the money, 8 years.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yes. It's been a big chunk of both of our lives. I mean, I was sort of
Yeah.
like, just, it was just, it's very difficult. I mean, one of the difficulties of raising the money was
Mhm.
that we were trying to do it in Europe. It's not in a European language. It
Yes.
doesn't
Yeah.
have a European character, which is the plucky journalist who comes from Britain, and we have to
Mhm.
we have to focus on her and all that kind of stuff. So, um, and also the nature of the film. I mean, what you're talking about,
Mhm.
this kind of multiple story issue of the film, without a main central character whose story we follow, and who's and all the other characters kind of are there in support of that main story.
Mhm.
Both Irada and I felt really uncomfortable with that kind of hierarchy.
Mhm.
Actually, this is the important story, and all these other people are kind of decoration, and
Yeah.
and and nor and we just felt about this situation in which people in which the film happens.
Mhm.
Um, it's like, how can I explain it to you? It's like it's as if you're carrying a mirror and it
Mhm.
slips out of your hands and it shatters into 1,000 pieces.
Okay.
Um, and maybe if you're really lucky and you keep all the pieces together, you can stick them back together
Mhm.
and into the shape of the mirror that was, but now it's fractured. And that's
Mhm.
kind of the way that Iraqis felt at this time, that they were a shard in a collection of shards that had been the country, that
Yeah.
had been a whole, but now no longer was.
Mhm.
So that was a very motivating part of it. That sort of image, really,
Yeah.
and also in that situation, you're living where the external circumstances are so powerful and impacting on everybody's life day
Yeah.
in, day out, um, impacting in different ways depending on who you were and your placement.
Mhm.
But you have a feeling of living your 3-act story at the same time as everybody else is living theirs in a way that
Mhm.
in this situation which isn't as catastrophic and is much more stable, you're much more focused on your individual life and
Mhm.
those of the other people that you know and that are around you. But it's a very
Mhm.
different feeling. So we really felt that this form conveyed something of what this situation was like, and
Yeah.
you're working all the time about what kind of um, resistance can you find, some psychic resistance to all this damage that's going on around you. It's just destruction around you all the time. So how you
Yeah.
find it. And in our film, sometimes it's humor, sometimes it's
Mhm.
music, sometimes it's different things, but there's small daily things that are happening.
Yeah. That's something I really liked about the film, especially being an Arab film festival and so much struggle happening within our region in recent history. We get a lot of films that are just are so beautiful and honest, but also just so sad and so depressing. But when it comes down to it, regardless of people's struggle, everyone is trying to find ways to cope, trying ways to keep their lives going, and they still find happiness and humor in even in dark places. And I
Mhm.
love that you showed that in this film, that it's not, I didn't leave it, as difficult and sad as moments were in it. I didn't leave it feeling sad or depressed or hopeless.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad. I'm
Yeah.
glad about that. Because you get the feeling that the struggle is to kind of find a way to renew a fragile sense of hope
Hmm.
every morning. Every morning you wake up and you think, okay, so and you have to leave the house and you don't know what's going to happen outside. You don't know whether you get back alive that day.
Hmm.
And it's that sort of struggle, and I was really keen because people are often just in situations like that.
Hmm.
They're depicted as some kind of abstract victim.
Hmm.
That's their whole being, and it's not true of anybody.
Yeah.
And it also it doesn't allow people to really connect with those characters. They feel sorry for them and stuff like, but it doesn't have anything to do with their own lives.
Yeah.
If they're not in that situation. So, all of that. Yeah.
On that note, I know it's a very cliche question, but I wanted to hear your thoughts on what you hope an audience may get out of this film. In particular, having the opportunity to show it at the Arab Film Festival here in San Francisco, and to my understanding that this is the U.S. premiere of the film. I'm excited to have it in front of Arab audiences, but who are may not be Iraqi, or even non-Arab audiences who may not have had the opportunity to see this story, especially with the way American and Western media portrays Iraq. So I wanted to get your thoughts on what you hope people might take away from this, because I know ultimately everyone may have their own interpretations.
People do ask that question quite a lot, and what I often say is people will take away from it what they will take away from it. But there are two friends of mine who actually live in the Bay Area, and American, obviously, and they saw the film. They saw it, and they wrote me. I'll just read it to you. They really followed the fractured nature of the different stories and everything like that, and they liked that. They felt that they really were with them, with all these various characters, and they didn't quite understand how that worked for them, but it did, because they hadn't seen anything like it before. But and then they finished watching the film, and this is what one of them wrote to me. And then we talked about it for a long time, unable to answer all the questions the film suggests about how to survive calamity, how to make ethical decisions when faced with brutal choices, but also the question of American culpability and our own role as tax-paying U.S. citizens. So what I feel, I was very grateful for this comment from them, and they're filmmakers, and I really, I love them, and I like their films a lot. So I would say that I would like people to feel involved with the characters and their situations, and to ask themselves this kind of question, these kinds of questions that my friends ask themselves, and to feel that these characters are not, as I said, not some sort of abstract victim, people just like themselves, and but living in a particular and particularly difficult situation. Because during the 91 Gulf War, like all the Iraqis in London, I sat glued to television 24 hours a day. And I never saw one ordinary Iraqi person on the screen. It was extraordinary. It was as if all that firepower was falling on nobody, and the country was empty. And I realized, really, I was really shocked by that, and I realized it made accepting the war much easier for people, because they didn't have to think about people like themselves having to deal with this stuff. So that's part of my aim in making this film. Also, the war in 2003, the invasion in 2003 was, waged in the name of the American people and the British people largely. And they don't know anything about the aftermath of that invasion and people's lives. And it's not just about, blood and wounds and all the rest of it.
I am not Iraqi myself, but I hope that people take away something similar to what your friends, your fellow filmmakers took away, and that I think there's something very special with the style of storytelling that you decided for this film. It's almost like opening up, a dollhouse and seeing inside and seeing all aspects of a life, and it makes it feel much more relatable, not more real per se, but much more relatable. And I hope people see themselves reflected, and maybe too with everything we've all struggled with in the past almost 2 years now. they might be able to relate even more. And I hope that some of the folks who attend the festival this year leave with a better understanding and a much more what's the word I'm looking for? A sympathetic understanding of what has happened in Iraq and the United States role in that. Yeah. I also wanted to ask, so you've mostly worked in documentary in the past. How do you think that experience in documentary influenced this film?
Well, I mean, oddly enough, in documentary films, I've never been drawn to making a documentary about a singular person. All my documentaries are full of people. So I've shot in places like, a Palestinian refugee camp in Beirut, and I shot a film in Iran about a woman who drives a bus long distance for 24 hours from Tehran to Bandar Abbas, the only woman who does that job.
Wow.
So that whole film is, yes, it's about her. I mean, she's the thread through it, but it's about a million other people that we met in the roadside cafes and living in little shacks under a pylon, electricity pylon, and people who collect roses to make rose water out of, and just random people that we met all along the way, and they were all characters, and lawyers who were, fighting for human rights and all sorts of stuff. So a huge kind of number of characters in it, and all my films are like that. I mean, it's just it's something about my take and what interests me. I live I've always lived in cities, and in cities you're in daily contact with strangers. I mean, people you don't know, but there's a strange kind of intimacy. You're all standing on a street corner waiting to cross. So my mind is going, I wonder, and you see somebody do a gesture or something, and you get a little inkling of what that person's life might be. It's not analytical, but it's just kind of intuiting what's under the surface of what you actually see. And I like to listen and look a lot. I do. I sort of watch and try to sort of figure out what's going on under the surface. So I think in that way, my documentaries and my documentary experience has influenced this film because it's got something of all that in it, I think.
Yeah. I love that. I'm feeling I relate a lot. I live in New York City actually, and I love to sort of pick up on little pieces of people's lives and then also think about what the rest of their lives might be. Maybe that's part of why this film resonated with me so much as well. As we near the end of our time here, I wanted to move away a little bit from the film, and I really wanted to ask you more about this school that you co-founded, and just how it came to be and what it's about. It sounds amazing. So I just wanted to know more.
Kasim Abid, who was co-founded the school with me, and I had spent some years going back and forth to Palestine to teach workshops, film workshops, and we taught in Gaza and Jerusalem and Ramallah and Birzeit. And he went on, I think, and did a couple of courses in Nablus and Bethlehem, which I didn't do. And in 2003, after the invasion happened, we were sitting in a cafe in Ramallah, and we were sitting going, okay, so the country's been invaded, it's under American occupation, and what are we going to do? And I said, we're not engineers or doctors or anything useful like that. We're just filmmakers. He said, I know. And we were very encouraged by the experience we'd had in Palestine because people are really up against it, obviously, there. And the young people were really, really took to making films. The people that we taught, they were brilliant. They would sort of, in a situation where there were, we were in, I was in Ramallah I can't even remember when it was, but it was when the Israeli army had reoccupied the West Bank. And So in that situation, with tanks on the streets and curfews and all the rest of it, the films went on. People were making films and they had stuff to say. And we just thought it's really important for people to be able to young people to be able to put their stories and thoughts and feelings and everything on the screen. Yeah. But we decided to try to do this, and we decided it should be free of charge.
That's
because
great, yeah.
Be able to pay. And Iraq had been through 13 years of really severe sanctions. I mean, some of the most punitive have been in history. And so in terms of film, I mean, there was no film stock, there were no labs, there was no digital equipment, there was no people couldn't make films in any way. And they'd really been deprived of that. And so we decided to see if we could set that up. But we decided to be very careful not to do what a lot of diaspora Iraqis did, which is to think they could go back and tell the people who'd lived through all of this and this Iraq what they should really do, because we knew, because we lived in New York and London and Paris or whatever.
Yeah,
we thought this, we're not doing that. So Kasim went back to see his family he hadn't seen for 30 years, and and he was there for 4 years, kind of going back and forth and shooting footage about his family. He made a wonderful film, which I got to cut, which was my luck. And but while he was seeing his family, he also made contact with a lot of young people in different places, who were studying or parts of clubs or whatever like that, and said, "This is our idea. Are you interested? And do you think this is a good idea?" And they leapt on it. And we got a really positive response. And so we just, we sent out a kind of sort of advertisement about it, sort of saying, this is starting up, it's da, 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 da. If you're interested, write in and interview. And that's how it started. So our first films were made in 2005. And really, they were short documentary films. We had basic equipment, and it's called Independent Film and Television College. It was like 2 rooms in an apartment, basically. That was the whole school.
Yeah.
And it stopped and started, and we had to be quite careful at a certain point at the time when Our River, Our Sky is based. It was difficult for people to get in. It was quite dangerous, especially for women. And at one point, an explosion went off not very far from the school, and all the glass in the windows was shattered, and that sort of stuff happened. And so they had to, but people kept at it. I mean, the students really kept at it, and they produced these films that were sort of about everyday life in Baghdad, dealing with issues, stuff in a way that wasn't actually being seen in the media at all.
Yeah. So is the school continuing now?
No,
or
it didn't.
No?
We opened it in 2004 and we closed it in 2013.
Okay.
Because for several reasons. First of all, Kasim and I both had quite big projects we were working on, and we just didn't have time. It was just the 2 of us,
Yeah.
We didn't have time really to do it properly. And also we wanted to expand to a different kind of filming, maybe get into fiction filmmaking and all of that. And we just didn't have the means to do it. And so we just decided to step away for a while.
Yeah.
But students, many of them have carried on and made films. So, yeah.
That's great. I'm glad even though it's not continuing, that clearly it's had a lasting impact. And yeah, I don't know if maybe I've seen some stuff from some of those students, if it's come past my desk at all. Possibly. Either way, though, I feel like I'm seeing this year we got a lot of really, really wonderful submissions from Iraq or from the Iraqi diaspora and about Iraq. And yeah, I'm very excited to showcase them this year. There's a group of shorts as well as your film.
I'd love to see them.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't think of what I want to say because I'm just like, when I get really excited about things that I love, I start to just kind of
Yeah, you and me both.
get,
We both get
get kind of blubbery, like, I love it so much. But no, it's a very strong program of short films, and especially coupled with your lovely film makes a really great feature for Iraqi film this year, and I'm very honored to have all of them. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to see if you have any other projects in the work that you can talk about, anything coming up soon that we can get excited for.
There's not, I mean, the I thought once I finished filming and editing the film and all of that, and you know, the post-production, my mind would be free. And it's not. It's not. It's an ongoing situation. So I haven't had a lot of brain space. I mean, there are a few things bubbling away, but I'm not sure. And it's not likely to be a fiction, but I don't know. I don't know yet.
Yeah.
But it will more than likely be in the Middle East, because that seems to be where. I mean, there's a whole lot of films I wanted to make in other parts of the world, but you know, you get put in a box, and my box was, you know, Middle Eastern women. So that's what I made films about. Yeah. So So I don't know. Yes, I mean there will be. I mean, yes, I hope I make another film.
Yeah.
Or other films. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're excited to see whatever you make next, and hopefully too, Our River, Our Sky will start to grow and expand and be widely available to everyone. I know that's a whole process as well as getting it out there for everyone to see. So
I'm really glad that the film is showing at the festival, the Air Festival. I mean, not just because it's the festival, because I know this festival from a long time ago. To, you know, met people who were involved in setting it up and all that stuff. So I'm just really happy about this.
Yeah. I'm happy that we could reconnect after all these years.
Yes.